Hey guys, it's Joey Gaming and welcome back to another video here on the Joey Gaming YouTube channel. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys about something that a lot of people don't know, and that is about the first Artemis mission back to the moon in over 40 to 50 years. Yes, you heard me right. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, back in the 1950s, we had something called the space race, where the USSR, or the Soviet Union, was trying to one-up the United States when it comes to space technology. You see, the Soviet Union want to show off, saying, hey, we're better than the United States, because we can show off that we can put a nuclear weapon in space, or we're just better at weapons technology than the US. And the US is like, nope, you're not. And then they went into something called the space race, right? And at first we were losing, and because the Soviet Union became the first one to launch a satellite, and the Soviet Union also became the first country to launch a man into space and later into orbit, which means that you just keep circling the planet without falling back to the planet. It's kind of a difficult thing to explain, but they went into orbit, right? And John F. Kennedy, the president at the time, said, hey, you know what? We're going to go back to the moon. Not because it's easy, but because it's hard. That's like a quote he said, or something like that. I don't know.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept.
But he says, hey, we're going back to the moon. We're going to show off to those dank communists that, hey, America is better, and we're going to land on man on the moon. And in the late 1960s, the U.S. became the first country in the whole world to land a man on the moon, with Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong being the first ones to step foot on the moon, right? And that happened, and the Soviets gave up. They tried to build their own rocket. It's called I forgot what it was called. I don't know what it's called, but it was a pretty big rocket. It had a lot of engines. It blew up on one of the flights, and the Soviets just gave up on trying to send a human to the moon. And to this day, the U.S. is the only country to land a man on the moon. So that is really, really cool. And the last mission we ever went to the moon that involved humans landing on the moon was back in, hold up, let me bring up my sources. That mission was called Apollo 17, and that launched December 7th, 1972, and they came back on December 19th, 1972. So we haven't been back to the moon since 1970. So that is insane. So for the first time since the 1970s, NASA is taking humans and Americans back to the moon. But you may ask, but Joey, why did we stop going back to the moon? And that's actually a good question. You see, the whole point of the space race is the USSR and America, or the United States, one-upping each other. And the way that they were doing this was through weapons technology. But developing weapons is bad, so what they did is they developed missile technology for peaceful purposes. For example, like space travel. It'd be like, oh yeah, so you know those rockets we're building? No, we're not using those for missiles. Instead, we're using it for our space program. And when you have a space program, that space program can also be turned into a military thing as well, because you can send like military satellites, or you can show off, or a country can show off that, hey, we do have the technology to build like nuclear missiles and stuff. So actually the whole space thing is actually kind of a big deal for these countries, right? And so basically it's just the US and the Soviet Union just beefing it out and just proving that, hey, our country is better than the US or the USSR, and that's kind of the whole point. And after the US won the space race by landing a human on the moon, there was no point for the USSR to continue doing that. They actually took away some money from their space program to put it in other things. I'm not exactly sure why. So basically, America has no real purpose on going back to space because, they already beat one of their rivals to space. And the USSR, or a similar entity, has no other ambitions on going to the moon or to space at all. So the U.S. Congress and the U.S. government decided, hey, you know what, we're going to move our budget a little bit, and they started taking money away from NASA. So at this point, there's not really a budget to go back to the moon. There's not really a purpose to go back to the moon, and that's kind of the whole point. And instead, what happened is that the U.S. started investing money into international efforts, like the International Space Station and the Space Shuttle and stuff, because those are a lot cheaper to develop rather than trying to build a base on the moon. But right after the Space Shuttle was retired, one of the presidents, I'm not sure who it was, started a new program, which was called the Artemis program. Well, I'm not sure if it was called Artemis, but they had this program to replace the Space Shuttle. And the whole thing that they decided to come up with was called the SLS rocket. So right after they retired the Space Shuttle, they decided, hey, you know what, we need a new rocket, and they built this SLS rocket. And this time, they had plans on going back to the moon, but they didn't really plan out what they were going to do when they get to the moon. They just said that, hey, we're going back to the moon, and we're going to build a brand new rocket. And this rocket was called the SLS. And the SLS is basically a space shuttle. It uses a lot of the same components from the Space Shuttle, just minus the orbiter, the actual Space Shuttle itself, and the just with a few other technologies. So it's mainly most of the hardware is Space Shuttle related, but some stuff is new as well. So it's not 100% all Space Shuttle stuff, but there's parts from the Space Shuttle on it basically. So that's kind of the whole point of the SLS, right? And so basically this rocket has been in development since 2011, because that's when NASA retired the Space Shuttle. The Space Shuttle was back in 2011. So they've been developing this rocket called the SLS rocket for over 10 years now. But it's not the only thing that the SLS rocket's not the only thing that NASA has been developing. They also have been developing a capsule. And it was called Orion. Orion is the next gen spacecraft that they use to transport humans to the moon. So that's kind of the whole plan. So over the years, for the next 9 to 10 years, they have been developing the SLS rocket and creating this brand new capsule called the Orion capsule. And they did a few test flights of Orion on another spacecraft, right, to test its re-entry and heating and stuff. And the tests were very successful as well, and that was really cool. Move up to like 2019 and 2018, around then. They announced that, hey, we're gonna need a human lander. So what they did is they had private companies build landers, moon landers, and it got narrowed down between 3 companies, which it was Blue Origin, SpaceX, and Dynetics, right? And SpaceX won the competition for their SLS, which is Starship, and I think Starship is way more advanced than SLS. I have no idea why NASA is not going with Starship. Actually, you know what? I do know the reason why NASA wants to use SLS rather than Starship, but that's a whole different thing, and I'll get to Starship eventually. But they selected Starship to be the lander for the human lander for the moon. Basically, how they're doing this is that Artemis, what they want to do is that they want to build a space station orbiting the moon. And it's not like a complete circle, like it's not a circle-ish orbit. It's going to be I forgot the name of it, but it's kind of a weird orbit. I'll also show some images of what I mean on the screen right now for you guys. It's kind of in that orbit. And the whole point is that it's going to have constant contact with Earth just in case there's something wrong. So basically, they're going to have this space station orbiting the moon, right? And they're going to have Orion, right, when it takes off from the launch pad in Florida. It's going to come and dock with the space station orbiting around the moon, right? And then the Starship will be attached to the space station, and then the Starship will detach and come in and land on the moon. And eventually, they plan on building an actual base on the moon, like an actual physical base, so they can test stuff on the moon. So that's kind of the whole plan, and that's kind of the whole thing. So SLS was actually supposed to take off last year in 2021, but due to delays, it got pushed back to 2022. And tomorrow is the first launch, the first time that SLS is going to be going into space and sending Orion to the moon. This first test flight, it's called Artemis 1, and it's basically following the same path of Apollo. And the reason why they selected Artemis is because Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo, so that's why they went and decided to go for Artemis. So anyways, Artemis 1 is just a test flight. There will be no humans on board with on Artemis 1, and basically it's just going to go to the moon and orbit the moon for quite a while, and then it's going to return back to Earth and splash down on the west coast of the United States and be picked up by a U.S. Naval ship. So that's kind of the whole plan there. And that's kind of the whole test flight then. And then 2 years later, in 2024, we're going to have Artemis 2. Basically, it's just like Artemis 1, but the main difference is that they're going to have, it's going to be a crewed flight. So this is going to be the first crewed flight to the moon. And after that, we're going to have Artemis 3. And Artemis 3 is going to be an actual human landing on the moon. And that's supposed to be done in 2025. Maybe thinking, why are they not doing anything in 2023? And that's actually a good question. They have to build a brand new launch pad or a crawler. Basically, how they transport the rockets from the VAB, which is that massive white building in Florida, is that they have this massive like tank thing, and it's called a crawler. They're planning on building a new thing like that. I'm not sure if it's like actual crawler itself, but they're building a new launch tower basically. And they need an extra year. That's what I heard. I could be wrong, but that's what I heard. So yeah, anyway, so that's what's happening. So that's kind of the whole SLS rocket. So that's really cool. So long story short, humanity and America is going back to the moon for the first time in over 40 years, and it's pretty awesome. I have no idea why people are not talking about it. The SLS rocket is a very powerful rocket. Well, actually, it will be the most powerful rocket for a little bit before Starship comes online. And you may be thinking to yourself, but Joey, why is the U.S. using using SLS rather than Starship? And that's a good question. So, the SLS rocket has been in development since 2011. Right, and it's mainly being used off of space shuttle components. So basically the boosters, the white boosters on the side of the SLS rocket, those are original to the space shuttle. And the engines in the orange part of the rocket, those are the engines on the actual shuttle of the space plane. And so basically they were using a lot of parts, so they don't actually have to develop any new technology. So they're just they're just developing new second stages and new Orion capsules and stuff. Basically that's what they needed to do, so that's why they want to use it. Another main reason is that the SLS rocket actually brings a lot of business growth to the United States. You see, a lot of companies are actually involved in creating the SLS rocket, such as Boeing and Lockheed Martin and a few other companies are responsible for creating this. So this rocket actually helps promote economic growth. And so that's the reason why Congress doesn't want to give SpaceX the keys to everything, because they want to have all these other companies grow. So that's kind of the main reason why they have that's why they keep the SLS, even though that Starship is far more capable than SLS and far more cheaper. And I'd rather that to be going into my tax-paying money, but it is what it is. So long story short, it's an exciting time for space travel, and the SLS rocket will be taking off tomorrow. In fact, guys, I'm actually going to be streaming tomorrow at around 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you haven't yet, make sure you guys go to the live stream and hit notify me, because I'm going to go live tomorrow watching the SLS rocket. So it's going to be pretty insane. I can't wait to watch it. So anyways, guys, I'm going to end the video here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm so glad I was able to share with you guys what the SLS rocket is and what it's going to mean for the future of humanity. So that's what's been going on. So anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and see ya. Peace.